Greetings to all my self-made executives and entrepreneurs. Welcome to Curious Conversation, a live talk show where we bring entrepreneurs together to learn from each other's experience and ideas to grow and thrive. I'm Adrienne Johnson, your host, the Lady Executive. Each week we interview entrepreneurs to understand the steps they took to be successful and why. We also invite a live audience to join and ask questions as well. So be sure to get your questions in the chat panel. My guest today is Patty Blount. Patty spends her days writing facts and her nights writing fiction. She's an author of contemporary internet issue novels for teens, as well as contemporary romance novels. She has delivered several inspiring keynote addresses, including the induction ceremony of the National English Honor Society. Her novels include Someone I Used to Know, named a 2019 Best Children's Book of the Year by Bank Street College of Education, as well as 2019 Yahweh Athena winner for both Best YA Contemporary Novel and Best of the Best. And most recently, You Too, a timely, heartfelt collection of essays of personal stories encompassing a wide range of experiences and will resonate with every reader who has wondered, why is this happening to me? Or secretly felt their own mistreatment of abuse as somehow their fault. It's not. I'm honored to welcome Patty Blount to the show. Hi, Patty. How are you?
Hey, Adrienne, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am very, very well. I am so happy that we were able to come together, have a moment to chit chat and bounce a few things off of you. So let's get started.
Sure. Okay.
All right. So the first thing I want to know is, how did you get into writing? How did all of this come about?
It's kind of funny. Writing is something that I have always wanted to do. It goes back to childhood. Most kids my age back in the day, we were cutting our teeth on Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys novels, maybe Trixie Belden's, and
Yes.
who didn't want to be Nancy Drew, right?
Yes, that was my stories.
Yeah, right. But once you outgrew those, there wasn't that much else to read.
Okay.
Judy Bloom was one of my favorites.
Yes.
Judy had a book out. Now, I'm dating myself, but back in the 70s, she had a book called Deanie. And Deanie suffered from scoliosis, which is curvature of the spine.
Right.
I remember reading this book. I was about 10 or 11 years old at the time. And throughout the story, you read, Deanie's entire journey, right? So her mother wanted her to be a model, and she was beautiful. And now she has this curvature of the spine that's going to require surgery and a really ugly back brace that she's going to have to wear for about a year, and physical therapy and all this other stuff. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is just awful. And then guess what happens? I'm diagnosed with the same disorder barely 6 months later. And the thing that was really kind of cool about it is I wasn't the least bit frightened, because I had already lived this journey through a fictional character, the safety net, right? That's one of the things that I love about YA fiction. And I think one of the reasons why I wanted to write it was because it provides that safety net. You can experience life and truly frightening experiences like surgery,
Yeah.
like a back brace, without actually having to go through it yourself. So it prepared me, Deanie's experiences prepared me for my own. And luckily mine were nowhere near as severe. I never needed surgery. I never needed to wear the brace. All I had to do was exercises for a while. So my point being that I realized, wow, writing is something I've always wanted to do. Maybe I can someday write the kind of books that young readers will see themselves in and hopefully inspire them to rise to a new level, right? So my very first novel was about a cyberbully. It was called Send. He was actually dealing with profound guilt from a suicide that he feels he caused by clicking the send button and posting a compromising picture on the internet that caused so much embarrassment to this kid that he ended up committing suicide. So it deals with really heavy issues: bullying, suicide, self-harm, guilt. And these are things that I think are universal themes.
Absolutely.
Right? So I wanted to be able to write the kind of literature that I felt other young readers could identify with, see themselves in, and hopefully stop or change behaviors that they themselves are guilty of and may not even know it, like bullying or doing nothing while they see bullying, right? Those types of things. But unfortunately, I didn't have the confidence in my own ability. It took me many, many years to be able to figure out how to finish a story. I think my first novel was published when I was about 45 years old. It took me that long just to figure out, you know what? I actually am kind of good at this. I think I may have a shot at being published. So for many years, I just kind of discounted my writing ability. I thought it was something everybody could do because, we all go to school, we all learn grammar, right? So
Right.
isn't writing in theory something we all should know, right? But there are different levels of skill in it. And it's something that I love to do. And I think that love shows, right? When you love what you do, right? What they say is that you never work a day in your life, right?
That's right.
So I think when you love it, you're just a little bit better at it than people who hate it, right? Because they're just trying to get it over with and slap it together, right? So
Yes.
it took me a while to find the confidence in my ability to put it out there, to take the risks, the gamble, and see if editors or agents would be willing to, run it all the way up the
Right.
publication flagpole.
Right.
And it wasn't until my mid 40s that I finally found that courage. And since then, I've published. I think I'm on my 10th book right now.
Wow. 10 books. That's amazing. That is amazing. So, um, Send, right? The book
Mhm.
Send,
That was book one.
for internet,
Hmm.
bullying. I think that, to be honest with you, Patty, if that book had come out earlier, right, for some of the adults that are on the internet now and TikTok and all of
Yeah.
these other things, bullying everybody. It's not just for young adults; it's for the grown folks nowadays as well. Um, but to your point about finding the confidence, that's really one of the reasons why I asked you on today, right? A lot of people have the want to do some things, but they don't have the self-confidence or the courage to step out of their comfort zone
Yeah.
and do what it is that they really know that they want to do, that burning desire inside. So they just stay in a box, which may be working a 9 to 5 for the
Right.
rest of their lives and not investing into themselves. So I'm so happy that you said that. The other point that you brought up was about writing. Girl, let me tell you, I hate writing.
Right.
I have honestly, I've tried to write about 3 or 4 books, and I was sharing this with one of our previous guests. Her name was Kaisha Slaughter.
Mhm.
She's a publishing consultant,
Okay.
and I was like, I've tried to write books, right, and
Mhm.
I wrote 4 pages, to your point, like if as if I was in school, right? I was writing an essay or something, and then I was like, okay, I'm done. I didn't.
Please let this be over.
Right. I was like, I don't think this is going to get published. But to your point, whatever your internal passion is, that's what you need to go after. And I'm so happy for you that it was writing and writing about these very sensitive topics and subjects. So, tell me, how did you narrow down into internet issues? Like,
Hmm.
how was that your niche?
That's kind of an accident. So I mentioned the Nancy Drew the Hardy Boys,
Yeah.
right? Those were what I, grew up reading. So
Right.
naturally, when I decided I wanted to be a writer, I wanted to write mystery. And so I had been writing mysteries for quite quite a few years. I've got 3 or 4, maybe more than that, just floating around different hard drives, and they just never sold. Right. So like my very first project was a hockey murder mystery. It was called Penalty Killer. I still love that title. And what I did is I took it down to Kinko's at the time, and I had it spiral bound, and I gave it to my sons as a Christmas present. And they passed it around to all their friends, and eventually it made its way to a teacher. So she wanted to read it because so many of her students were doing book reports on this book that doesn't physically exist anywhere other than in this Kinko form. And so she sent it back to me corrected. It was covered in red pen.
How rude.
Not good. Really not good at all. I'm even the seventh grade English class figured out who done it by like chapter two. But it was a good learning experience, right? So I was writing all these mysteries and I realized, okay, nobody seems to want them. Maybe there's just too many out there. What else can I write? And so then I started romance. Writing romance is actually to me like, a master class in fiction writing because you're writing not just one character now. You have one protagonist in a mystery who's typically the amateur detective. In a romance, you have two halves to a couple.
Right.
And, so you've got each of their stories, plus you've got that relationship that's developing between them, and that becomes almost a third character. So that's why I consider romance to be like the master of fiction writing. So I thought, if I can do this, I can do anything, right? So I wrote a couple of romance novels, and I was midway through book two in what I'd hoped would be a series, right?
Okay.
I'd already written book one, nobody wanted it, but I was having such fun with this. I said, I'm going to keep doing this. Maybe I will self-publish it. Halfway through book two in this series that never got published, and then all of a sudden I got this idea for what became Send, right? And it was because my son was in school at the time. I have two sons, and they're both grown up right now. But at the time, he was in like sixth grade, and he was actually the subject of bullying, but I didn't know it.
Oh,
This had been going on the entire school year, from September all the way to the following spring. So I found out about it in like May, and at that point, he was very close to suicide, and it was a most terrifying experience. And we got him help. We spoke to this principal and the teachers and the other child's parents, and it was a whole big debacle. But the thing that I still cling to is the fact that we didn't have social media back then. We didn't have Twitter. We didn't have Facebook, right? So this bullying was limited to a single 45-minute period in school. And once that bell rang, it was done. It didn't follow him home, right?
right. Right.
We didn't have this, so
Yes.
this was not in his pocket. Okay, it was ending. It had a just a time limit on it, and I think because he was able to escape it is the only reason he's still alive today. And that has always like it kind of sticks in my throat. It's like a lump right now when I think about this, right? So a year later, now he's in seventh grade, and now I have a knock on my door from another irate parent who's now accusing this same child of bullying her son. And of course, as a mother, you know what my first response was, right?
Not my child.
Not my kid. Especially not this kid, who I nearly buried. Okay.
Right.
Believe it or not, it was true.
Oh,
It was
wow.
true. Now, I'm not saying my son really was bullying him because he insists he didn't. But that child perceived my son's actions as threatening. And ultimately, that's the definition of bullying. This boy felt threatened. That's all we needed to know. So once we discovered that, my son agreed he would never speak to him again. He wouldn't bother him again. And that was the end of it. We didn't have any issues with it. But to this day, my son is 29 years old. To this day, he carries a tremendous amount of guilt over
I
this.
bet. I bet.
He created fear in a boy that, after the same fear that he lived through, right? That's what gave me the idea for Dan, who was the protagonist in Send, a kid who spent years bullied. I'm sorry, being the bully, and then was bullied himself, and then realized I never meant for any of this to happen. Like I never, I thought I was just having fun. I was playing, and somebody died because of what I did, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life, right? So that became sort of the I would say the not so much the idea for the story, but more of the seed for the idea, right? And he began talking to me, and then, this is something that I hate to admit out loud, but yeah, there's a lot of voices going on in my head, and I tell everybody, no, I'm not crazy. It's literally characters that are talking to me. So Dan would actually say things to me like, I did that and I feel guilty. And how do I live with this? And that became the story. And I actually wrote that into the book where, he talks to himself often, and talking to himself became another character. It's a character called Kenny, who is a hallucination of Dan's. And, this is how the book unraveled. It was basically my own thought process. Like, how would a kid grow up, there's no video game reset. to real life, right? So
Right.
when you realize you've done something is click, a simple little half a second action that can't be undone. And it has this snowball effect, and in fact, it's got a mushroom cloud effect on some lives, right?
Right.
Where you've seen with certain politicians, who, like Anthony Weiner, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it just has this catastrophic effect that cannot be contained. And
Right.
that was what he was experiencing. So I said, you know what? I think I'm going to try this. So I wrote the whole book. But my first mistake was I made Dan in his mid 20s. And I made, he was an adult and he was trying to cope with something he did back when he was a little boy. And I had a literary agent who, to this day, God bless her for writing me a personal note. Most literary agents do not do this. They'll send you a form letter and it'll say, nope, sorry, this isn't for me. Good luck. She took the time to write back and said, I love the premise, but your characters are adults facing a childhood problem. She says, my advice to you would be to rewrite this as a kid's story, preferably YA. I didn't know what YA was, so I had to
Mhm.
do some research into young adult fiction, right? So most people think young adult is a genre. It's not. Young adult is the age classification for many genres of fiction, right? So in this case, it's typically high school. It could be
Okay.
12, but it's around like 13 to 18, that time frame. So it's typically the high school age group. Within that group, you can have historicals, you can have romance, you can have fantasy, paranormal. All the other genres of fiction exist in the YA
In the
age group.
YA. Got it. Okay.
So in my case, I'm writing a YA contemporary romance, right? And so what I did was I thought to myself, okay, if I put him back in high school, I'll make him a senior because I wanted him to be able to drive. And he needs a love interest. I have the perfect love interest. I am going to make him fall in love with his victim's sister. So she's going to know exactly who he is, but he has no idea that this girl is the sister of the boy he ended up bullying to death because it's a different school. He never met her back in the day, right? He's changed his name. One of the reasons that they changed, his whole family changed their name and kept moving is because her father has been threatening them and, actually confronting them to the point that they feared for their lives. So they fled. It's actually a half sister, by the way. It's not full sister. So he had no idea that they were related.
Right.
So he falls for her very hard and unfortunately leads her father straight to him. And that's basically as much as I can tell you without revealing the entire story.
Okay.
But yeah, that book became my foray into publishing. So I remember the day I pitched it. I was at a networking event where I met some editors and agents, and I was sitting with two editors from Source Books, which is a female-owned publishing company that's really rising up the ranks right now. It's one of the top 10 publishers, and I didn't realize both of them worked for the same company. So I pitched each of them separately and they both loved it. And I told them exactly what I just told you. I said, it's a book about a former bully who's trying to cope with the suicide he caused. And, he changes his name. He moves away and he ends up falling in love with a girl he does not realize is his victim's sister, but she does. And as soon as I added those last three words, but
They were
she,
in.
both of their faces went,
Yes.
they were like, send me the manuscript. So
Yes.
I did. I sent them the manuscript. They didn't like it. One of them asked me to rewrite a completely new ending for it, which I did. And that was when they offered me a 2-book contract. So I gave them send, and then I had to write the second novel, which was called TMI, Too Much Information.
Yes. Yes.
And that came about because they loved the idea of Send being bullying and internet related, and they wanted a second novel that would kind of align with that same theme.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we bounced ideas back and forth, and I said, okay, so what about the whole idea of trusting the wrong people on the internet, right? Like
Right.
the whole catfishing thing, right? They
Yes.
said, oh, perfect, because catfishing had become like a show now on TV.
Right. It was a thing.
They love that idea. So we came up with the theme for TMI. And now the problem was I only had 6 months to write a whole novel. was.
How long did it take you to write Send?
Sen took me years to write because I was doing this in my spare time, and I didn't have any deadlines, and it was just a fun project. But now
Okay.
it became, oh, okay, this is due, right? So I'm like,
Deadlines.
how do I do this? That was, let me tell you, that was like, a crash course in priority management. But I ended up taking 2 months later than anticipated. And Sourcebooks was wonderful about this because my mother passed away.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry
they
to.
were like, all right, don't worry about the deadline. You get it to us when we get it. And I'm like,
Right.
oh, thank you so much. So
Mm.
they were very, very gracious about it. And after TMI was published, I happened to be, I think I was at a book release party for an author who had the same editor as me at Sourcebooks. So our editor was there, and I just happened to say to her, I got this idea for a book, but I think it might be too risky. And she said, well, tell me about it. What is it? I said, well, I want to write a story about a girl who is raped. And I want it to be sort of a he said, she said story.
Hmm. Hmm.
You don't know who to believe. She's like, okay, I like that idea, but who's going to be the love interest? Please don't tell me it's the rapist. I said, no, no, I'm not making a hero out of a rapist.
Right.
What about his best friend? So now he's forced to figure out who to believe, his best buddy or this girl that he's now falling for.
Right.
She says, that's got potential. I love it. So she says, why don't you write up a synopsis for me and let me know? So I did. They loved the synopsis. And then Some Boys was born out of that. And I wrote that book in about 2.5 months because it literally poured out of me.
Oh, wow.
It poured out of me. That book was inspired mostly by media. There was a story in Ohio. I think it was a town called Steubenville, Ohio, and there was a rape trial happening. There were four boys, four that I know of. There might have been more. Four boys accused of raping a classmate of theirs,
Yes.
and this went on for hours. She was unconscious from too much alcohol, and they recorded all of their abuse, and it made the rounds among everybody at school, and they just treated her like a playground. I think they dumped her unconscious body on her front lawn. And then a couple of years later, when this goes to trial, CNN gets on TV and goes, oh, these four young men have lost their football scholarships. And what a shame. And I went, I'm sorry. You want me to feel sorry for four rapists? How about we feel sorry for the young girl whose life has been completely destroyed by their callous treatment of her unconscious body? At
Right.
no time did anybody call 911. At no time did anybody call a parent because an unconscious child is in their midst. No, instead, they just said to themselves, you know what would be fun? Let's take off her clothes and all rape her.
Right.
But
Right.
CNN wants me to feel sorry for them. So I was so, and you can see how angry I'm getting.
I,
I was so angry over
right.
this
Right.
that I wrote that into Some Boys. And to
Wow.
this day, it's been, I don't know how many years. It's 8 years later. That editor still insists that I write my best work when I am furious.
Well, the passion was there, right?
Yeah,
And you were feeling it. So it came out in words on paper.
absolutely. And I guess this is
Absolutely.
a great way of, channeling anger.
Well, true, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think it's appropriate to talk about your tagline. So your
Yeah.
tagline is read, roar, reveal. What does that stand for? What does that mean?
Read, roar, revel is actually
Revel.
revel,
Okay.
revel. So, as I said earlier, when I first turned my sights on young adult fiction, I wanted to be able to write the kind of fiction that Judy Bloom was writing, where people, young readers could read this in the safety of their own homes and feel as if they've experienced these kind of trials and tribulations of growing up, right? And then when I started finding my own voice, which was the internet issues, tough issues that teens are facing, usually privately because they don't want to, unburden on parents, like grief, like self-harm, like drinking to excess, sexual assault, bullying, trusting the wrong people on the internet. These issues, kids all feel as if they are the only ones experiencing them, right?
Mm.
But they're not. These are universal issues. So I wanted to be able to write them in such a way that would empower them, especially young female readers.
Mhm.
I wanted them to feel as if they could read my novels and say to themselves, I can be like Grace in Some Boys. I can be like Julie in Scent. I can stand up and I can shout to the world when I feel somebody is wrong, or if I feel I have something to say. I don't need to be quiet about it. That was what I was trying to say when I want them to revel in their power. I want them
Mm.
to feel empowered. I don't want them to have to suffer in silence. And I feel way too many of us, especially the adults, we feel that teenagers just have nothing to say. And if they do have something to say, they don't know what they're talking about. We see that all the time right now with the way politicians treat Greta Thunberg. Okay. Nobody wants to hear what this young girl has to say. They dismiss her, they ridicule her, they make fun of her. She's a child who is frightened that this planet will not be here when she's an adult.
Right.
Instead of listening to her concerns, people just put up the hand and go back to school and shut up. You're a little girl. I don't want that. I want them to revel in their power. I want them to be able to read, to put up that fist and go, yeah, you know what? I have opinions. I have a voice. I'm not going to stay silent anymore. And especially when it comes to some of these issues, right? Like the bullying, for example. Bullying thrives in situations where bystanders do nothing,
Right.
right? The bully is a performer. He's performing for an audience. You take
Yes,
away his audience, he loses his power.
that's right.
Right? So I'm hoping by empowering the bystanders into doing something other than just watching,
Watching.
right? That if they report, if they stand up, defend, it goes away.
Right.
Same with sexual assault, right? So rape in this case, in the case of Some Boys, is more of a he said, she said story where depending on whose point of view you're reading, it may not be rape in your eyes. And I did that deliberately. And yes, I'll cut to the chase. It was rape. But when you read his account of it, you wonder, maybe it wasn't. Maybe she's
Mm.
lying, right? That's exactly the kind of myth I'm trying to dispel, right? So I
Right.
want I
Right.
want readers to understand that rape is always, always the word you use when the sex is not consensual, right? So
Right.
some of that refers to the vocabulary that boys use. They'll use and it all goes back to sports. I've noticed, right? So if they use vocabulary like score, right? That implies that there's a game being played. I don't want them thinking of sex as a game, right? So I'm
Right.
trying to get that's very subtle when in the writing. I don't get up there on a soapbox with a microphone going, "Thou shalt not," because I'm going to lose them, right?
Right.
I try
Right.
to present it to them in a way that they understand that, oh wow,
Speaking their language.
just because a girl didn't say no doesn't mean this is not rape.
Right.
But if she's unconscious, she can't say yes or no.
Right.
Unconscious, therefore,
It's
isn't
no.
consent,
Right.
right? It's not consent. That's the point that I was trying to make, right? So that's where I'm saying, like, okay, I'm giving them the power to tell boys when they're wrong and tell them when they're acting like idiots. And,
Right.
that's where the revel comes from. Revel in their power. And just
Understood.
because they're teens does not mean they have none.
Understand. Understand. That's powerful, Patty.
I hope so. I hope
That's
so. That was
so
the entire intent.
yeah. Yeah, that's deep to be quite honest. Um so so it is safe to say through your stories that you have, your niche, your intent for writing all came from personal feelings about something, things
Mhm.
that you were passionate about, right? And I want my audience, the individuals that are out there who want to be published authors, to think about that, right? Think about what is important to them and what is what is their passion, and channel that passion through their pen onto paper or through their keyboard onto their computer screen, whatever, however it is that they get it down. Do you type it all, or do you write? Like some people, I know some people that still handwrite.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny. We talked about this at work. Handwriting is very powerful for memory. So if you want to make sure you remember something, write it by hand, definitely. But my handwriting, Adrian, on the other hand, it's not a pretty sight. So I do type. I
Okay.
can't read my own writing several days later, and then if I write something down by hand, it's very likely I won't be able to read it. So I do type. My process is kind of all over the place. Every project is a little bit different. Um, I type in fits and spurts. I frequently write out of order, out of sequence, because
Really?
yeah, it goes by mood for me. There's some days that I feel like, I just want to tear the hair out of my head. So on those days, I like to write what we call black moments, right? Because I'll channel my own rage into the characters. On days when I'm feeling really happy and peppy and excited, I love to write the happy endings, right? Or the meet cute. The meet cutes are always fun too, or the first kiss. So yeah, and I may not always use that writing because you have to make sure it fits the story back downstream. But there's it's never wasted effort, right? If I don't use it at that moment, I may use it at some other point. But it helps me. I think tapping into how I'm feeling at any given moment makes me a better writer. Does that make sense?
Interesting. It
Yeah.
does. It does. I never thought about not doing it in a certain sequence,
Yeah,
right? Like,
for me it works. For me it works. I don't know if it works for every author.
well, I'm gonna
Because
give it a try. I'm gonna try.
that's what I say whenever I mentor when I mentor authors. You have to look at this as shoe shopping, right? The process for writing a novel, there are so many out there. Every author has a process of their own, and many of them will teach workshops on this. And
Okay.
I've taken dozens. I've read dozens of books written by other authors, and no single method works perfectly for me. So I use bits and pieces from all of those different authors. So I try them on. They're a pair of shoes. I try it on. If it doesn't work, I throw it back in the box and I move on to the next one. And sometimes what I end up doing is taking like a piece of it and incorporating into my own process. Right. So, many, many years ago, one of my first novels, it was probably Send. I used to use those 3-panel science project boards.
Yeah.
Remember those?
Yeah.
So each panel would be a different act in my book, and I would paper them with sticky notes, and that would become my outline. And then that got to be just a little too intense for me. It was too much drudgery.
Mm.
So now what I find helpful is, I have a whiteboard that's upstairs in my son's room. I will pull that down and I'll stick it in my windowsill and I'll just kind of scribble things, kind of like a mind map. And that gets me started because for me, I have to know how the book ends before I start writing it, right?
Hmm.
So like in the case of Some Boys, right? In Some Boys, I needed Grace. Grace's vindication was for someone to believe her,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it was going to be Ian, who was her rapist's best friend. So having someone believe she's not lying was the ending that I envisioned, right? And I had to get her to that ending. So what has to happen between the beginning and the end is becoming that act two. And so if I can see and envision the ending, the rest of the writing becomes easier for me, right?
Okay.
Um, in Someone I Used to Know, which that's this book, that was the one that was the Athena Award winner.
Yes. Yes.
This is also dealing with rape, but this one is a different perspective. This one is there's no question a crime took place. There's no question who done it, right? We know who done it. Um, my protagonist Ashley did everything right. She reported it. She went to trial. He was sentenced, but he got a slap on the wrist. He's out in a year, right? So now what do? How do you cope with this, that you did everything you were supposed to do and still your life is ruined, but he's out free, right?
Right.
So her journey was different than Grace's. Hers was, how do I function in society when he's in the same society as I am? And how do I mend my broken family, right? Because her brother, in this case, was the other protagonist of the story, was best buddies with her assaulter and participated in this sort of toxic masculine event that led to her assault
Right.
and saw nothing wrong with it and felt she was overreacting. So how do you mend that relationship? Right. So
Right.
that became the end of that book, was their relationship being mended and not perfect. It wasn't like, oh, I forgive you. Okay, let's go, dancing into the sunset together.
Right.
It was more the first step toward reconciliation and forgiveness. And so once I'm able to picture that, and now it's sort of like, I guess, the destination in my GPS, right? My writer's GPS. Now I know how to guide the car to that spot on the
Right.
map.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't always need like a full plot. I just kind of I have to hit those big moments. I need to know, what each of my characters is feeling. What is it they want? What's standing in their way of getting it? And
Sure.
most of the time it's themselves, right?
Right. Right.
And what am I going to do to get them over those hurdles? And usually, I can do that on a whiteboard now and I'm good.
I started. I travel nine. A lot for my 9 to 5, and
Right.
um, a couple of years ago, I started writing a novel. I thought I was going to do a romance novel. It was about a person that travels all the time, and she falls in love with a flight attendant who she sees often on different flights, right? And then I got to a certain point, and I was like. Okay. Now what, right? But I never thought about thinking about the ending
Yeah.
first. But that makes sense, right?
It
Start with the
does.
end in mind and how do you get there? So,
Yeah, exactly. It becomes the goal, right? And
right,
once every novel has to have like a really compelling character development arc, right? You
right,
want your characters to change. In fact, this is one of the biggest criticisms that James Bond always gets, is that he doesn't change. He's always the same character, right?
yeah,
You want your character to emerge from the story changed, different than how he began it, right? So that's what you have to decide, right? Now, romance romance by definition has to have a happy, either a happy for now or a happily ever after.
right,
So how do you get them to the point of happy? What does happy look like for that character? Right? That's what you have to answer. So once you can answer that, then the rest of it kind of falls into place.
right,
But
right,
remember, romance, as I said earlier, is sort of that master class, because you have to do this for three different characters in a novel, right? You
right,
have to do it for your main protagonist, the love interest, right? Because they're a couple,
right.
and you also have to give the relationship its own sort of through.
Identity, right,
Yeah, you have to treat the relationship as a character, because when you look at it this way, right? These two people are fully formed adults, right? So they've gone through life. They've hit an age. It's probably 30, 35 for most romances, unless you're writing YA. What is it about this person that's going to tick all the boxes and make the love form that all the other people in their lives didn't? Right. So there's got to be something in this particular case, this particular character, that's unique and special. And that's one of the things that you'll bring forth in the story. And that's where the magic happens, right?
okay,
One of the things that I love, I've been on this historical romance kick lately. I've been reading book after book of historical romances, and this goes back to my whole read, war, rebel tagline. Most of the historicals back in those days, Victorian England or Regency England, women had no agency whatsoever. They were property. They were bartered. I mean, marriage in those days was a sale. It
right,
was basically like the father of the bride is saying, well, here you are. Here's the dowry. Take this woman off my hands so I no longer have to feed and house her. She now belongs to the husband, right? So she has
right,
no say in the matter. She can't vote. She can't own property. So I just read this one incredible book where the protagonist she wants no part of marriage, and she's kind of like a child at heart, and she's designing a board game. And a board game back in those days, this was going to be a big hit. And she's proposed marriage, and she says, I can't possibly marry you, because if I do, my board game becomes your property. It's no longer mine.
Oh,
You will then tell me your ideas, and I have to obey, because that's what's in the marriage law, right? So those things like that, oh my God, they just blow my mind. But this is how it was back then, right?
right, right.
Every single one of these heroes in these books that I'm reading, they are providing these protagonists exactly what no other man ever did, which was autonomy and respect. And in one case, striking the word obey from the marriage ceremony, right? So if a guy is willing to do that for you, that's a hero. That's my point, right? So if you can
Right,
rise above what everybody else is doing, you have to come up with a character who's willing to provide this particular character, what no one else has ever given her or
right,
him before.
right.
And now you've got some relationship or romance magic.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I will keep that in mind. I might shoot you over a quick
Yeah.
a quick look at my idea, right? I'm gonna go back and outline it first and think about the ending, and then we'll talk. All right, so we're starting to run out of time, but I have one question that I do want to get to you. But before I do that, I want to remind everybody that all the people that are watching, to get your questions into the chat panel. We will give Patty an opportunity to answer those questions. I see some that have come in already, and you have some fans out there, Patty. But my question to you is, through this journey of being a novelist, what has been your biggest aha moment?
Um, okay. So I would say my biggest moment is for, as an author in general, is that it's not ever going to be easy, and it probably shouldn't. And just to trust the process. Whatever my process is for that given project, go with it and ignore the doubts, because every single project I will sit here crying, going, oh my God, I suck. This sucks. I'm just going to buy a hot dog cart. I'm giving this all up. I'm never doing this again. Why do I do this to myself? It's part of the process. And just kind of, I have to weather that storm, deal with it. It's never going to go away. It just is. That's it.
I think that's in every line of business when you're trying to do something for yourself, right? Like even through the creation of coming to the ultimate creation of Curious Conversations. I too have gone through the ups and downs of I knew what my end result was supposed to be,
Right.
but every time I tried to do something, I was like, oh, this is just crap. I can't, forget about it. Right. And I think that's a great aha moment that you had for yourself, that you were able to reflect back and see that that was the case. It took me a really, really long time to realize that everything that you're going through is part of the process.
And it took me so many years, decades really, before I got the confidence to put my writing out there. And I just find that confidence, I'm never going to have that confidence where I'm going to go, yeah, I'm good at this. I'm just not.
Right.
And I just accept that and do it anyway. So, and it's funny, like once I gave myself permission to do that, like
Yes.
I'm giving myself permission to kind of suck in a sense, right?
Right.
But it takes the pressure off. And now I'm able to kind of go through the whole process of, like the first draft, the revisions, and say, all right, you know what? I've done this before. I can do it again.
Right. Right.
And just trust the process.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I don't know how many times I had to remind myself that nothing has to be perfect, and just step out there and do it, and let's see where it
Just do
goes.
it. Yeah. Yep. To paraphrase Nike.
Just do it. All right. So we have a couple of things that came in. We have Michelle Lowe. Let's get Michelle up on the screen. So Michelle said, thank you for shining a huge light onto real world problems that none wants to
No
talk
one wants
about.
to. Yeah.
No one wants to talk
Yeah.
about, right?
Well, that's what I said earlier when I referenced Greta, right? She's trying to bring to light that this planet is dying,
Right.
and people are just trying to tell her, go back to school, shut up, you're a little kid, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you know what? She does. And that's the agency that I'm talking about. I want to give young adult readers that agency and let people understand that we are trying to hear them. At least I
Right.
am.
Yeah. Yeah. We do have another question. Linda Hickey,
Oh,
excuse
hello,
me.
Linda.
Have you decided on ending an ending and then changed it after
Yes.
you started writing? Okay.
Oh yes, yes, I have, and that's one of the pitfalls to writing out of sequence, right? So I may have an ending in mind, and then as I go through the story, discover that the characters just don't, seem to want that ending anymore. That did happen with Send originally. The original ending to Send was a much more violent ending, and my editor said, "Yeah, nah, let's rewrite that." I said, "Okay, let me see what else I can come up with." And then on my own, it kind of came that way with Someone I Used to Know. The Someone I Used to Know ending that's in the published version of the book came through the writing process. It was actually, for a while, I did not know how that book was going to end, which was kind of like writing without a safety net for
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
But yeah, so sometimes it happens. And that goes back into that whole trusting the process for me.
Nice.
Mhm.
Nice. All right. We have looks like one last question that came in. I've written a book but don't know where to start to get it published.
Okay.
What should be my first steps?
Hi, Jason. So it depends if how you want to do this. If you want to do traditional publication, your first step would be to find a literary agent. And to do that, you have to master the art of writing a query letter. There are tons and tons of resources online that you can find for help. The best one, in my opinion, is Janet Reed's Query Shark. Janet Reed is a former literary agent. So she has a Query Shark website where she actually deconstructs query letters and tells writers where they're going wrong. So I would start there, write the query letter, find out, you can research which agents to submit to, and then take it from there. On the other hand, if you want to do self publication, what you'd have to do is find a good editor. Do not presume that you don't need one. Trust me, you do. We all do. Find a good editor, get the book edited, polished as much as you can, and then find out how to find covers, cover artists, and get it up on Amazon.
Nice.
Mhm.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you so much, Patty. Everybody, yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
one last thing. I just
Sure.
wanted to do a shout out. I promised my newsletter subscribers I would answer one question for them.
Okay, please do.
Yeah, just let them know that I find most of my ideas, believe it or not, through the news. So hopefully that will they know what that means.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Well, everybody, please, 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 please make sure that you run out and you pick up those books that Patty was talking about. There's Someone You Used to Know, Some Boys, The Way It Hurts, TMI, as she's mentioned as well as a Match Made at Christmas. We didn't talk about that, but we'll talk about that
That's
another
contemporary
time.
romance.
Okay, yeah.
And Nobody Said It'd Be Easy is also adult contemporary romance.
Yes, yes, yes. So please make sure that you run out and grab those books. Also, make sure that you visit Patty on all of the social media outlets: Facebook, Patty Blount Novels;
Mhm.
Instagram, she's at Patty Blount 3; as well as on Twitter, she is at Patty Blount. Thank you so much, Patty, for your time today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Jay, I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. A recording of this show will be available on YouTube at The Lady Executive, as well as on Facebook. Make sure that you go there and join the Facebook group, The Executive Lounge, where you'll be able to get early access to these live tapings of the show, as well as participate in the live studio audience. As always, I want to leave you with one last thought. Experience is the master teacher, even when the experience is not our own. Until next time, bye-bye for now.